Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into something that's probably on a lot of Californian homeowners' minds right now. Those HVAC refrigerant changes coming up in 2025.
Yeah, definitely a hot topic, no pun intended.
Ha! Well, we've got this fantastic guide from RK Mechanical Air Services. It's written by someone with like 35 years of experience in the industry, so they know their stuff.
Absolutely. And it lays out all the need-to-know info in plain English.
Exactly. So basically, our mission for this deep dive is to break it all down for you guys and figure out how these changes might hit your wallet, especially if you're still running a system with that R-410A refrigerant, the one a lot of people call Puron.
Right, because it's not just about swapping out one chemical for another. This shift has some pretty big implications, and we want to make sure everyone's prepared.
For sure.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I was kind of surprised to learn that even newer systems using R-410A are going to be affected. But before we get into nitty-gritty, can you give us a quick refresher on why refrigerants even matter in the first place? I think some folks might just assume it's all about keeping things cold.
It's a bit more than that, actually. Think of refrigerants like the heart of your HVAC system. They're the things that absorb heat from your house and then release it outside during summer, and they do the reverse in winter. Basically transferring heat energy to keep you comfortable no matter the season.
So it's more about moving heat around than just making things cold.
Mm.
Okay, that makes sense.
Exactly.
Now, the guide mentions this thing called global warming potential, or GWP. I got to be honest, I don't totally get what that is or why it's such a big deal.
So GWP basically measures how much a certain gas can add to global warming, compared to carbon dioxide, which has a GWP of 1. It's like the baseline.
Right.
So if a refrigerant has a GWP of, let's say, 1,500, that means it has 1,500 times the warming potential of carbon dioxide. Over like 100 years, usually. That's the time frame they use.
Okay, so the higher the GWP, the worse it is for the environment. Gotcha. And that leads us to 2025. What's the exact deadline and what's changing?
January 1st, 2025. That's when California is officially banning the sale of any new HVAC systems that use certain refrigerants with high GWPs. And that includes R-410A, which has a GWP of over 2,000.
Whoa, okay, so this is serious business. But what does this mean for the everyday homeowner in California? Let's say I've got a system with R-410A that was installed a few years ago. Am I suddenly breaking the law?
No need to panic. You won't have to replace your current system right away. You're still good to use it. But there are a few things to keep in mind.
Okay, I'm all ears. What should I be aware of?
Well, as R-410A starts to become less available because of the production ban, the cost of servicing your system is probably going to go up. Think about your regular maintenance or any repairs. If a technician needs to add more refrigerant, they'll have to use what's called reclaimed R-410AA. And because the supply is limited, that could get pretty expensive down the road.
Ouch, yeah, that's something to think about. Yeah. Are there any other options besides just waiting for those higher maintenance costs?
You could convert your current system to use one of the newer refrigerants. But honestly, that can be super pricey. Sometimes it even costs almost as much as just getting a whole new system. So it's not always the best choice financially.
Gotcha. So converting might not be the way to go. But what about people who are looking to buy a brand new HVAC system right now? What should they be thinking about with this deadline coming up?
They're actually in a pretty good position. Any new system that gets installed after January 1st, 2025 will already be compliant because manufacturers will have to be using those new refrigerants with the lower GWPs like R-454B or R-32.
So for new installations, the problem kind of solves itself? But I'm guessing those new systems come with a pretty hefty price tag, huh?
They can, yeah.
Yeah.
But you often get what you pay for. These newer systems are usually designed to be more efficient, which means you could save a lot on your energy bills over time. Plus, you're doing your part for the environment.
Okay, so there's a trade-off there. Higher upfront cost, but lower energy bills later on. It seems like there's a lot to consider. For those of us who aren't ready to splurge on a new system just yet, what are some things we could do to plan ahead?
Well, if you're thinking about sticking with your current R-410A system for a while, it's a good idea to start budgeting for those potential increases in maintenance costs just to be on the safe side. And if you're not sure about upgrading, you might want to do some calculations and compare the upfront cost of a new system with the potential savings on energy bills over time. You might be surprised by the numbers.
That's a good point. But what about the environmental impact? I know a lot of people are concerned about their carbon footprint. Should we factor that in too?
Absolutely. Upgrading to a system that uses a more eco-friendly refrigerant can make a real difference in reducing your impact, and sometimes there are even extra benefits.
Like what? don't leave me hanging.
A lot of states and local governments offer rebates for people who upgrade to energy-efficient systems, so you might actually be able to get some money back. It's definitely worth looking into.
Okay, so it sounds like it's time to start doing some research. But let's say someone's totally on board and ready to upgrade. What are the most important things they should look for when choosing a new system?
The first thing is to make sure the system is designed to use those new refrigerants. We talked about R-454B or R-32. You don't want to end up with a system that's going to be outdated super quickly.
Yeah, that would be a bummer.
Mhm.
So compatibility is key. What else is important?
Energy efficiency is huge. Look for models that are Energy Star certified. They have to meet certain standards, so you'll be using less energy and saving money long term. Plus, they're usually quieter and just perform better overall.
Right, efficiency is king.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I wouldn't underestimate the importance of finding a good HVAC contractor. They can help you figure out the right size and type of system for your house, and they can walk you through all the options and help you make the best decision for your budget and your lifestyle.
Great advice. So we've covered a lot here, and it's pretty clear that these 2025 refrigerant changes are a big deal for California homeowners. Before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, any final thoughts?
I think the main thing to remember is that even though these changes are big, they shouldn't freak anyone out. Just knowing what's coming can help you make smart choices about your home and your budget.
I love that knowledge is power. And we'll be back in part 2 to dig even deeper into this topic. So stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're ready to get into the weeds a little bit more with this whole refrigerant situation. Learning about all these upcoming changes has got me thinking about my own HVAC system.
Yeah, that's a good thing. It's always smart to be ahead of the game.
For sure. One thing that really stood out to me when we were prepping for this was that this shift away from the high GWP refrigerants isn't just happening all at once. It's been going on for a while now.
That's right. The production and import of R-410A in the U.S. actually started getting phased out back in 2015.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
Yeah, so we're already seeing the impacts of that. And by 2030, the ban will include even more refrigerants. Anything with a GWP over 2200.
So it's more of a gradual process. It's not like they're just going to cut everything off in 2025. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But why the phased approach? Why not just ban everything all at once and get it over with?
Well, it's all about giving the industry time to adapt and come up with new solutions. Can you imagine the chaos if everyone had to switch to completely new refrigerants overnight?
Yeah, no thanks.
There would be huge shortages, prices would go through the roof, and everyone would be totally confused.
Yeah, that sounds like a disaster.
Yeah.
So this gradual phase out is basically giving manufacturers time to develop those climate-friendly alternatives and make sure there's enough supply to go around.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between doing what's good for the environment and making sure things are actually doable in the real world. And, we're already starting to see some really interesting new refrigerants popping up. Our R-454B, for example, has a GWP of just 466.
Wow, that's way lower than R-410A.
Right, so that's a really promising one. And you mentioned another one earlier, R-32.
Oh yeah, what about that one?
R-32 is another good option with a GWP of 675, so that's a decent alternative too. And who knows what other innovations we'll see as we get closer to 2030.
Yeah, it's like a race to see who can come up with the best climate-friendly solution. But let's bring it back to the homeowners. If I decide to keep my R-410A system for now, are there any downsides besides those potential maintenance costs? I mean, it's still working just fine.
Well, besides the financial side of things, there's also the environmental impact to think about. Using a refrigerant with a higher GWP does contribute to climate change. And, there's always a chance that your system could break down in a big way after 2025.
You mean like a situation where it's just not worth fixing?
Yeah, exactly. If it's a small problem, you might be able to find a technician who still has some reclaimed R-410A. But if it's a major part that fails, you might have to replace the whole system, even if it's relatively new.
So there's a little bit of risk involved in hanging on to an older system. That makes sense. But let's switch gears and talk about those fancy new systems for a minute. You mentioned they're usually designed to be more energy efficient. Can you explain what that actually means in real life?
Sure. One of the big things they look at for energy efficiency is the SEER rating. That stands for Seasonal Energy Efficiency Ratio. It basically measures how much cooling the system puts out for every unit of energy it uses.
Okay, so a higher SEER means it's more efficient. But what does that actually mean for my energy bill?
So let's say you have an older system with a SEER of 10 and you upgrade to a new one with a SEER of 16. You could potentially cut your cooling costs by 30 to 50%, depending on your climate and how much you use your AC, of course.
Wow, that's a lot. And I'm guessing that kind of efficiency isn't just because of the refrigerant itself, right?
Got it. A lot of newer systems use technology that older models just don't have. like variable speed compressors. These compressors can adjust how much power they use depending on how much cooling you need at any given time, instead of just running at full blast all the time.
Ah, that makes sense.
It's a much more precise way of controlling things, which means less energy wasted and lower operating cost for you.
It's like the difference between slamming on the gas pedal and gently accelerating. Makes sense. Are there any other cool features that come with these new systems?
Oh yeah, tons. A lot of them come with smart technology, so you can control everything from your phone or tablet, adjust the thermostat, check your energy usage, even get alerts if something's wrong, all from your couch.
Now that's convenient. Okay, so let's say I'm convinced and ready to upgrade. Where do I even begin? It all seems a little overwhelming.
The best thing you can do is find a good HVAC contractor. They can come out and figure out what your house actually needs. Take into account the size of your space, the climate where you live, and of course, your budget. They can also help you figure out all the different options and make sure you're getting the right system for you.
So you're saying I shouldn't just try to figure it all out on my own?
Well, it's always good to do your research, but HVAC systems can be pretty complicated. Having a pro guide you through the process can save you a lot of trouble down the line. Plus, they can spot any issues with your ductwork or insulation that might be affecting your system's efficiency.
Okay, so finding a trustworthy contractor seems like the first step. What are some other things I should be asking about when choosing a new system?
Well, we've already talked about the Energy Star certification. That's a must-have. But you should also think about what features are important to you, like zoning capabilities, so you can control the temperature in different parts of your house separately. Or maybe noise is a big concern for you, so you'll want to ask about how loud the system is. It all depends on your individual needs and preferences.
Right, it's not just about the technical stuff, it's about finding a system that fits into your life.
Exactly. And speaking of individual needs, it's important to remember that upgrading to a new HVAC system can be a big investment, but there are ways to make it more manageable.
Okay, welcome back for the last part of our deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, but I know there are probably still some questions out there. So let's try to tackle some of those common concerns homeowners might have as we get closer to 2025.
Sounds like a plan. It's time to put all this info into action.
All right, let's start with the big one, the one that's probably on everyone's mind. Do I absolutely have to replace my system if it's still using R-410A? I know we've touched on this already, but I think it's worth repeating.
Yeah, you're right. It's a big question, and the short answer is no. You don't have to immediately replace your system if it's still working. But like we've been talking about, that doesn't mean there aren't things to consider as we get past that 2025 deadline.
Okay, so it's not a legal requirement,
So,
but there might be some practical or financial reasons to think about upgrading down the line. What are some of the red flags that homeowners should be watching out for?
one thing to remember is that as that R-410A refrigerant gets harder to find, the cost of maintenance and repairs is going to go up. Just imagine needing a simple refrigerant top-off a few years from now. Finding a technician who can get their hands on some reclaimed R-410A might not be easy, and it'll definitely cost you more than it does now.
So even routine maintenance could start to get pretty pricey. What about if something more serious breaks?
That's when things can get a little tricky. Let's say a major part of your system fails after 2025. You might be in a tough spot. It'll be hard to find a technician who's willing and able to fix an older system using that R-410A, especially since it'll be so scarce. And even if you do find someone, the cost of those repairs could end up being almost as much as a brand new system.
Yikes. So it's kind of a gamble. You might end up spending a ton of money trying to keep an old system alive when it might be better to just start fresh.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to weigh those costs and risks against the benefits and the peace of mind that come with upgrading to a newer, more efficient model.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's better to just bite the bullet.
All right, let's talk about those new systems then. What are some key questions that homeowners should be asking when they're shopping around?
The first thing is to make sure that the system is actually designed to use those new low-GWP refrigerants, the R-454B or the R-32. It sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people forget to check that.
Yeah, that would be a big mistake. It's like buying a new phone that can't run the latest software. Not a good move. What about energy efficiency? How can people make sure they're getting the most efficient system?
Don't be afraid to ask about that SEER rating. Like we talked about before, a higher SEER means you're getting more efficiency, and that translates to lower energy bills every month. It's a win-win.
So higher SEER, lower energy bills? Got it. Anything else?
Of course. Ask about things like noise levels, warranty coverage, any rebates or incentives that might be available. The more questions you ask, the better.
Okay, you've convinced me. I need to start looking into those rebates.
Yeah.
Speaking of money, let's be realistic. Upgrading to a new system can be a big expense. What are some ways to make it a little easier on the wallet?
Well, the good news is there's help out there. A lot of state and local governments offer rebates and incentives for people who install energy-efficient HVAC systems. Start by checking with your utility company and your local government to see what's available in your area.
Right. I always forget about those programs. It's
Right.
like free money just sitting there.
Exactly. And don't forget about financing options. A lot of HVAC contractors and manufacturers offer loans or payment plans with pretty good interest rates, so you can spread out those payments and make it more manageable.
So it's kind of like buying a car. You don't have to
Sure.
pay for it all at once. That
Yeah.
definitely takes some of the pressure off.
Exactly. The key is to shop around and compare your options until you find the best fit for your budget.
Awesome. Any last words of wisdom for our listeners before we wrap things up?
I think the most important thing is to be proactive. Don't wait until the very last minute to start thinking about these refrigerant changes.
Mm.
Do your research, learn as much as you can, and start planning now. It'll make the whole process a lot smoother and less stressful if you're prepared.
Couldn't agree more. And remember, you don't have to go through this alone. There are resources out there to help. Check out the RK Mechanical Air Services website, look at other reliable HVAC sources, or talk to a trusted contractor. You've got options.
Exactly. It's all about making smart choices that are good for you and good for the environment.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of HVAC refrigerants. We hope you're feeling informed and ready to take on these 2025 changes.
Absolutely. And until next time, stay cool, everyone.
That's a wrap, folks.